What creation truly show how scary humans can be? Story 1. There is a bioweapon invented in the former USSR that essentially tricks the body into attacking the myelin sheaths around neurons. So somebody thought of a way to essentially give people MS as a weapon. Answer: okay, I know this is scary, but at the same time this is fudge cool. Because how the fudge did one just discover that? Like, imagine if we put all this time and effort into creating cures. Oh wow, advance we would be. But then I think about corporations, and imagine all the shoot they have done to stop cures from rolling out BC. They make so much money off of treatment. Story 2. Flaying someone as a torture method until passing, keeping them fed and watered to draw out the process duration. Answer: there are ancient Mesopotamian inscriptions in which rulers brag about plastering columns in conquered cities with the flayed hides of their victims. From the earliest civilizations, we have enacted the worst cruelty upon each other. It was a shock to me to first realize that the pinnacle of torture had already been developed before written language. Story 3. That Project Pluto was even considered is just appalling. It was to be a cruise missile that used a nuclear engine after flying to the Soviet Union and dropping its payload of nuclear bombs. It would fly back and forth over populated areas, spewing radiation and poisoning the land while using its sonic shockwave as a weapon against the populace. Answer: just to clarify for other readers, a nuclear engine or nuclear ramjet engine works ingeniously in space. The idea is to surround the inside of a jet with nuclear material all facing inward. Originally, it would be surrounded with rods that were plutonium on one side and inert material on the other. That way, the nuclear material could be turned away from the nozzle to shut it down. Having all that nuclear material focused into the same point had the same reaction as the infamous Demon Core, but controlled. As air traveled through the jet nozzle, it would be superheated to thousands of degrees instantly. The expanding gas would propel itself out of the nozzle. The original idea was to use liquid hydrogen as a fuel in space, because that takes up the least amount of space and weight when stored. The Soviets launched a few of these into space successfully, and they are actually extremely efficient. But worry about nuclear fallout, which there wasn't any in testing IIRC, among public opinion kept them from ever being used in the US. In this case, they would swap the hydrogen for atmospheric air, removing the need for any onboard fuel storage. Air would enter in, and as it passed through the jet nozzle, it would be superheated, causing it to explode out the back without any moving parts. It would be able to keep moving on its own for decades, theoretically, but it would leave a trail of nuclear fallout everywhere it went. Story 4. I'm going to defy the norm here of the gory and graphic and go with something else. The giant strip mining machine in Germany. Bagger 293. If you've never seen it, definitely recommend checking it out on YouTube. Super cool, yes. But the idea that we are genuinely capable of tearing apart mountains with relative ease is insane to me. Sure, nukes and shoot are terrifying, but imagine going back to some poor tribal time in the Bronze Age to show them that. Your sacred mountain? Gone, destroyed, reduced to rubble. There's something terrifying in machines that are that effective. Answer: you say that, but you know those teeth on the bucket that do all the destruction. They are consumables that must be replaced, just like the blades on a bulldozer. Man-made machines like oil drilling rigs, tunnel borers, and strip miners are incredibly fascinating, but they don't encapsulate the dangerosity of humanity. They are dangerous machines, but I think the human-made disasters, like the Titan submersible, the African oil pipe crisis, and all of the evil atrocities committed by individuals like murderers, and those committed by groups the Nazis and Imperial Japanese, are the real Scary side of humanity. With the Tian submersible, you have a CEO who negates safety practices to speedrun, getting his submersible in the water. The African oil pipe crisis saw 5 workers sucked into a high-pressure oil rig pipe, and the company who owned it wanted to seal them in there for good, while delaying and hampering all rescue attempts. Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan just speak for themselves. Government-sanctioned human vivisection and other torture that's terrifying. Story 5. White phosphorus or many other chemicals meant to burn people in war. White phosphorus being particularly nasty. Story 6. I know it's not the scariest in terms of how physically damaging it is or visceral, but Auschwitz and other Zyklon B shower facilities are hands down the scariest. Humans took out every middleman they could to express lane passing and disposal of themselves. Answer. I remember watching a documentary one time that discussed the order for the crematories. Normal crematories at the time were designed to burn a few bodies and operate maybe half a day. The Nazis wanted ones that could hold dozens, operate 247, and a lot of them. The level of evil of Nazi leadership is not surprising. The evil of some random engineering team at a German manufacturing plant just casually designing a machine that serves no logical purpose other than to dispose of a massive amount of bodies at a time when your government is rounding up millions of people. The complicity of people I would guess were otherwise decent human beings to just let genocide happen is frightening. Story 7. The passing camps, 1941-45. The Germans just created a eliminate camp every day, just eliminate thousands of thousands people. Sad and evil. Story 8. Ma'am, that is an 11-pound whole slab of deli ham. It has no bones, fat, or connective tissue. It is an amalgamation of the meat of several pigs, emulsified, liquefied, strained, and ultimately inexorably joined in an unholy meat obelisk. God had no hand in the creation of this abhorrence. The fact that this ham monolith exists proves that God is either impotent to alter his universe or ignorant to the horrors taking place in his kingdom. This prism of pork is more than deli meat. It is a physical declaration of mankind's contempt for the natural order. It is hubris manifest. We also have a lower sodium variety if you would prefer that. Story 9. Landmines. Because most of them don't go off during the war, they sit around and injure or eliminate civilians, often children. And we're talking missing limbs. Maybe evisceration. Nobody comes back and cleans them up. That task is left to the inventive work of the people most affected by them. Ukrainians jury-rigging farm equipment to be remote-operated. People training rats to sniff out mines. Even once you find one, it still needs to be disarmed or safely detonated. My uncle saw a Vietnamese man basically vaporized directly in front of him. Story 10. The spear. It's a simple weapon that can be used by almost anyone. It's so deadly and simple. If you're good enough, you can fight almost any animal and eliminate them with just the simple spear. Story 11. Everything. Humans are simultaneously perfect and horribly flawed. We can create anything with enough time, energy, and effort. Just 140 years ago, we created movies. Now we have computers which are slowly learning and becoming sentient. In the future, we might be able to create simulations so real that we might forget reality. However, we are arrogant, stubborn, curious. We created a system where the rich get richer and the poor can't progress just because we felt like it, and nobody wants to question it. To quote that guy from Jurassic Park, your scientists were so preoccupied with the idea that they didn't stop to question if they should. Our civilization really fudge cold the more you think about it. Story 12. Someone already said the atom bomb, so I guess I'd go with slavery. As a concept, that's pretty terrifying. But according to a quick Google, apparently some ants practice slavery too. They wage war and they collect slaves. Ants are our sole competition on the slavery front. Story 13. There is a video community on YouTube where primarily men wait until women are in the deepest stage of sleep, passed out. From there, they open the woman's eyelids and play with their eyes, most of which is darn near certainly not consensual. Story 14. Just any military-grade weapon, TBH. Just to think that there's billions and billions of dollars each year poured into an industry where the whole idea is to sit around, think about the most efficient and effective ways to eliminate human beings in certain situations, and then design and build the weapons to do it is pretty sick. Answer. And sadly, war is never going to go away, because even if total peace could somehow be achieved in a region, like, say, all of Earth, history has shown every time a region is unified, it inevitably ends up in conflict with another region at a larger scale. A great example, the ancient German tribes fought, created the German nations out of their wars, and eventually they made the grand federalized Holy Roman Empire, which just got in wars with Russia and France. It just scales up the conflict from villages to small nations to big nations to empires and beyond, because end of the day, the final, total end of any argument is when the other guy is no longer there to argue back. The other end of the day is that somewhere, sometime, that kid who realized he could beat up the smaller kids for the lunch, money will get in charge of nation. And as Pisco Despot, he is going to try and take by force. And so the good and decent folk need to stand ready and able to prevent that from happening. IMO, the goal of eliminating war is nearly impossible. The goal should be to try and mitigate war so it doesn't do so darn much damage. Stuff like the Geneva Convention is step in the right direction. But IMO, we should be making the elite who want to fight so badly actually go out and fight, like in the days of lords and knights where all the rich people were the army, were expected to be the army, and then ultimately went out and eliminate each other, and the peasants went, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, when a territory changed hands. In fact, for a while, armor was so good, that is, was more like, and so Lord Kumquat and his 500 knights beat Lord Dingleberry and his 520 knights so severely the other man finally conceded defeat. They had dinner, and the territory of the central lowlands was singed over to Lord Kumquat, as was per custom of chivalry, and randoms were paid to recover POWs. And of course, the final kind of counterintuitive nature of things. A military government, which is what lords and knights were, is actually less likely to end up in pointless wars. Because it turns out when the guys who start the wars have to actually personally march out and fight in the wars, they end up making really sure they want that war. This is contrast to the modern day where civilians who will never see a lick of danger are free to start conflicts and then have somebody else, their nationalized military, go fight for them. But in turn, the subservient military never gets to whack the Congreman Parliament in the back of the head and go, no, starting a war over cheese, you lunatics. Of course, it's the modern era. Maybe we could talk them into going at it in a game of War Thunder or Mordhau, or maybe a COD tournament. I know, EVE Online so they can pour their real-life money into an advantage in the virtual battle. Spare all us common folks the whole industrial war on our doorstep thing. Story 15. The Brazen Bull. I don't know if it's true that the inventor showed it to a king who then threw him in and cooked him alive to see how it works. Story 16. People who win your vote because of the jobs they created, and those jobs they created wouldn't ever be enough to buy a home or even health care. They expect you to be patriotic while you are living the life of a 5 to 9 slave. Story 17. My vote goes to meat processing plants. Poultry, pork, beef, take your pick. The scale and mechanical callousness of the process really shows the depth of human cruelty and dehumanization. Story 18. Atomic bombs? What other answer do you need? We made something that could theoretically end all life, used them twice and saw the consequences, and decided to keep making more bigger and dangerous ones. Self-destruction at its finest. One wrong move and we all die. Story 19. People who hurt and abuse and inflict cruelty on animals. The creation of testing on animals. The creation of over-farming and hunting. Answer. I used to work at an animal shelter, and the amount of abuse and neglect cases we received was staggering. Sometimes it wasn't even out of sadism. Sometimes the perpetrators were just dumber than a bag of rocks. If it makes you feel any better, though, the amount of people in a community who volunteer, donate, and band together to help rehabilitate injured or traumatized animals is extremely uplifting. Story 20. Lobotomies and the entire catalog of psychotropic substances. Oh yeah, and the atomic bomb. We are such a messed up species. Story 21. Momo. It was originally meant to show a lady who spent too much time playing Fortnite to teach kids a lesson, but some group of teens ruined it and started making videos online with the thing that told little kids to do horrendous crimes, such as burning down their house, eliminate people, and then manipulating them into thinking that thing was their friend. The creator had to take it down and the teens went to prison. Story 22. Any torture method, like the brazen bull or the wheel in the medium age, even the blood eagle. All of them are exclusively to give the person who suffers the most pain they will ever suffer in his life. Story 23. Cyberbullying. The amount of vile shoot you can say to someone just because you're behind a screen is horrifying. I get that everyone says to not let them bother you, but online mob mentality is a thing, and a swarm of messages tearing you apart or threatening harm has to start stacking up at some point. Story 24. The invention and usage of napalm. It was specifically invented for military purposes and is one of the most cruel things ever used. Even more evil is the reformulation that was created to ensure that it would keep burning, even if the person hit by it went into water. Story 25. Artificial intelligence. We are literally replacing outer selves. I literally am looking at an AI ad as I'm typing this on Reddit. Story 26. Many espionage experts consider the latest attack by Israel to intercept pagers in the global supply chain and turn them into indiscriminate weapons as an unprecedented act of terrorism by manipulating the supply chain that humans have not touched ever. The heights of terror that this act unlocks are very scary. Here's a director of CIA talking about it. Story 27. Sometime in the 80s, a teenager took a bottle shaped like a bear that used to store honey and turned it into a bong. Should have been working for Fudge NASA. Story 28. Scientists have once created a miniature black hole in a lab. If they F it up, we are all just dead and there is no way of escaping. Story 29. If we talk about works that portray how terrifying humanity can be, for me, 1984 by George Orwell is the one that achieves it the most. The first time I held that book in my hands, I felt a mix of anguish and amazement, as if I were witnessing a future that, though dystopian, didn't seem so far from our current reality. The idea of a government capable of controlling absolutely everything, even what we think, is chilling. But what struck me the most was how people are manipulated to the point of betraying one another, becoming accomplices in their own oppression. That human capacity to dominate, destroy another's will, and justify it as necessary always leaves me with one question in mind. How far can we go if fear and the ambition for power completely consume us? What's most terrifying is that this kind of control doesn't need advanced technologies to work, just the will to subjugate others and the indifference of those who allow it. And honestly, that scares me far more than any fictional monster. Story 30. Cocomelon, literally developmentally damaging children by forcing them into a hypnotic trance to the point that toddlers still can't speak at age 4, while YouTube markets it as wholesome children's edutainment. Story 31. I enjoy watching videos on military weapons like tanks, jets, aircraft carriers, cannons, trebuchets, etc. from pretty much any point in history, but sometimes I get a bad vibe just thinking about how much time and effort we've put into improving our means to eliminate one another. You can still wear clothing now sewn from natural fibers just like someone 7,000 years ago. That's how little we have advanced as far as clothing. But at that time we were jabbing each other with sharp sticks. Then we had bows and arrows and metal swords and catapults and still said, "Hey, I need better ways to eliminate." PPL. Then we had cannons and muskets and said, "Hey, not good enough." Then we had AK-47s and army tanks and said, needs improvement. I can hold this trigger down and eliminate 10 guys in 3 seconds, but it's kinda whack. Wish I had some chemical or biological weapons. Then we got them and said, something more deadly would be nice. Now we have aircraft carriers and stealth fighters, etc. I mean, the 2 atomic bombs dropped on Japan eliminate 150,000, 250,000 PPL combined. Seems good enough, right? The nuclear weapons we have now are up to 80 times as powerful and are delivered by programmed ICBM. Instead of needing to fly a plane and drop them, who drops 1 bomb, eliminate 90,000 PPL, and rushes back to the lab to improve it? Humans. Animals still biting each other like 100,000 years ago. Story 32. Nuclear weapons, hands down. And most people don't even fully grasp how fudge insanely destructive they are. Story 33. There are plenty of weapons that are horrible, but the latest creation of drones spewing molten metal is horrifying. Story 34. Some guy is working on making the real nerve gear from SAO, that if you put it on, you can't take it off until you beat the game. If you do, it'll send electric pulses to your brain and eliminate you, and if you die in the game, the same result. Fudge, what? Story 35. What truly makes humans indomitable isn't any tangible weapon, but our spirit, our intellect, our ability to respond rationally and selectively to every problem we encounter. Therefore, something that shows how scary humans can be wouldn't be some brute force weapon like a poison gas or atomic bombs. It would be something that displays our intelligence and selective rationality in full effect. It is for this reason that I suggest online shooter video games as a creation that shows just how scary humans can be. We made machines capable of communicating across the world and running combat. Simulations in real time, and we participate in them for fun. We use advanced nanoscale supercomputers and a communications grid capable of transmitting a copy of the world's longest book in under 10 seconds in order to simulate warfare for fun. That's some Klingon shoot. Story 36. Religion, by far one of the most dangerous and easily manipulative things to use upon the masses, to get them to act and do things in the name of something that doesn't even tangibly exist from the Dark Ages to now. Story 37. The philosophy of antinatalism. The thought that a species in any capacity could believe that the most moral thing for it to do is intentionally die out actually scares me. Story 38. I thought I read somewhere of a design for a nuclear cruise missile that was designed to fly back and forth at supersonic speeds to spread radiation and render the whole of Russia uninhabitable. But the US decided not to build something so horrific. Story 39. There was video of experiment where people make a cell that resemble a human face to experiment with making artificial face with expression. It just make me feel eerie. Story 40. The hydrogen bomb. We already knew how big and devastating the nuclear bomb was, but its yield had limits, and we as a species were like, how do we remove those limits? And when we did, the guy responsible for it said, "Welp, we just guaranteed the end of the world someday." Story 41. Long-range acoustic devices, LRAD, have been known to be pretty darn effective and terrifying for those exposed to them. Sonic weapons in general, really. Anything categorized as such that DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, whips up in their lab is definitely worth looking at. Story 42. Passing camps. Pick one, anyone. Nothing more horrifying than extermination on an industrial scale. We treat each other worse than some animals treat their prey. Story 43. Chicken chips and chicken biscuits. I eat these and take a moment to think we grounded up live animals and converted them into something like crackers and potato chips. Then we add chicken flavoring to them. Truly diabolical. Story 44. Elon Musk. AI and robots are the biggest threat to humanity and will one day overtake us and eliminate us all. Also, Elon Musk. Check out this robot I just made. Story 45. Rules of war. It's generally insane to me that instead of getting along, talking it out, and not having a war, they just say you may brutally take down this man this way, but if you do it this way, then you'll be punished. Story 46. What they did to Reddit, not what it was, but what they did to it helped ruin the internet. Greedy cons. Story 47. On a more light-hearted side, braces. Humans wrap metal around their teeth and sometimes break bones for cosmetic reasons. Piercings and tattoos. Same thing. It's a kind of badass thing, and a species that does that just to look nice is kind of scary. Story 48. I also have a demyelinating disease. Was partially paralyzed for 9 months. Lots of nerve damage and neuropathy. The initials are CIDP. Stands for Chronic Inflammatory Demyelinating Polyneuropathy. My immune system is slowly and painfully trying to destroy my body. It's doing a bang-up job, so for... Story 49. I think of the torture method where they cover someone in milk and honey, leave them somewhere like a boat where bugs get into them and die alive getting eaten. Scaphism? That's gotta be brutal. All of it's expensive, so apparently who practiced it only saved it for the worse offenses. Story 50. The concept of rules and laws, such as the Geneva Conventions, because we constantly need to set boundaries and remind ourselves what not to do. Story 51. Machinery of war. I went to an air show recently, and it's crazy to feel the thunderous roar and power of those jets. Then realizing these are machines of passing sets in, how horrifying it would be to have them coming at you ready to fire. It makes me sad for anywhere that has had airstrikes. The pure fear that these would cause, let alone the utter destruction and passing.